I think we have everyone. We've got all the directors. Steve, everyone from admin team. I think we've got everyone, don't you?
Yes, I do.
All right, well, let's go ahead and call our Iowa City Community School Board meeting on Tuesday, May 26th, 2020 to order. My name is Janet Godwin, and I want to thank those on Zoom for joining us. I'll start with introductions. Superintendent Steve Murley, directors Lisa Williams, Paul Ressler, Sean Eystone, Ruthina Malone, JP Clausen, Charlie Eastham, and Kim Colvin, recording secretary. We do have community comment as part of our agenda tonight. However, I don't see any community members in our attendee group, and we don't have any admin team or board members over in the attendee side either, so that's a bonus for tonight. But should people want to comment, they can raise their hand and address the board. Timer will be present for 4 minutes. Moving into our agenda this evening, let me just get to board docs. I think the first thing up will be to approve our agenda for tonight. Is there a motion to approve our May 26th agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, Kim, sorry, we're ready to vote. Sorry.
Ruthina, I'm not getting yours.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, Kim. On consent agenda, I saw that there were some questions around bills and seemed to be answered satisfactorily. Is that the sense of the directors?
I have one question too, Janet.
On
On
bills?
item, not on bills, on item number 11.
Okay, would you like to pull that?
I don't necessarily want to pull it. I'm just going to ask a question to the staff about
I
information.
think we need to pull it. I think we need to pull it.
Okay,
Charlie,
that's fine.
Pull item 11 and we'll discuss it after
right.
we go on the other items.
Okay,
there
I'll
any-
go with the flow here.
Great. Are there any other items directors would want to pull from consent agenda?
I need to pull 10.
Okay. Any others?
I'd like to pull
14.
number 8.
8.
And 14.
14. So we've got 8, 10, 11, and 14 to pull from consent agenda. If there are no others to pull, is there a motion to approve our consent agenda minus items 8, 10, 11, and 14?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Kim, we are ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Paul, item 8.
I just wanted to pull this one so that I told Matt previously that he could just maybe explain the new roles that are on there so that people know that may watch this in the future, that those aren't new positions necessarily or added positions to the admin team that we're creating.
Yeah, so thanks, Paul. This is part of our restructuring conversation to successfully meet the challenge ahead here in the next school year. So we're excited that we're recommending to you Diane Schumacher to be the interim director and Scott Kibbe to be the interim director of teaching and learning for secondary. And with those two moves, then we have Justin Colbert that will fill in as interim principal at Liberty High School, and Kim Fitton will move from dean of students to assistant principal at Liberty High School, and then we'll still work to fill the dean of students role. So there's no additional FTE to that. Diane and Scott will share Diane's current curriculum responsibilities, and then one of those FTE is will be my vacated seat from assistant superintendent to interim superintendent for the next school year. And so we'll hold those positions as interim and then see where we're at the end of the school year, of course. So and Adam's just texted me here that I'm cutting out a little bit, so put off my video here just for a little bit. Did all that come through clear, Paul, since you asked the question?
I mean, I understood it because I knew what was happening, but
I just didn't know if my audio came through okay. Adam was telling me I was cutting up a little bit. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure people could hear. So yeah, again, we have those two that'll be assuming those different roles at central office. And just to explain that part, the curriculum piece will be shared by Diane and Scott when Diane was doing our current curriculum director role. So we won't be filling that position. Then that second spot is from my vacated seat as assistant superintendent. So excited for all four of those individuals that are on the personnel agenda tonight.
One question then, how is Amy fit into that structure?
Yeah, so Amy will essentially Diane and Scott will report to Amy. And so that kind of creates a couple layers there on the teach and learning side. With that team and that director team we've traditionally had, those directors have reported to Amy and I both. And then now with this new structure, we'll have two sets of directors that will report to each Diane and Scott, and then Diane and Scott will report directly to Amy. So creates a little greater capacity for us there in a little different model, but it's very similar to the structure of when Amy and I started at central office, and we were both directors of school, and then reported to Becky Furlong at the time when she was the chief academic officer.
Thanks for that clarification.
so with that, I would move that we approve item number 8.
Second.
Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Lisa, item 10.
Thank you. As you all may know, I am an employee of DOJ as my day job. And as such, when I ran for board, the department was very clear that I could not participate in matters that involved DOJ without prior approval. I did not seek prior approval in this case, and so I will be abstaining from the vote on the DOJ agreement, and that is why I pulled it.
Thank you.
Since it's pulled, can I just make a comment on this?
Go ahead.
You know, I think I just want to highlight that since all of this came out and all the district has been doing in the meantime, and really especially Ben Grimm highlight kind of his work on becoming an expert on inclusive play, and that, you know, we're going to settle this with the DOJ and we'll be right with the ADA, but that I just want the public to know we're going above and beyond that to have really the best playgrounds in the state. And I just want to thank staff for all their work on that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, here. And I think the inclusive play document was attached to board docs just to show that we are not just about compliance. We're about going beyond, and Team Ben and the entire playground committee did an awesome job on that. Any other comments on this item? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve item number 10.
Second.
Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with directors Ressler, Godwin, Clausen, Malone, Eystone, and Eastham voting yay, and Director Williams abstaining.
Thank you. Okay, Charlie, item 11.
And this is an item to approve an IJAG agreement at West Tyson, no City, I think. And I noticed in reading this agreement that on page 3, point number or paragraph number 11 provides that the district will provide the some comparative data to the program, so that students standing on a number of parameters can be looked at the end of September, and then I think towards the end of the close of the school year too. So it strikes me that this is a way of evaluating a program, doing a data analysis to evaluate a program result. And I wanted to ask if I had a chance to ask the superintendent if the data analysis or the data reporting that the program that the agreement calls for has been done, and if it's available for prior years.
Oh, that's a good question. They usually provide us with their data analysis and their synopsis, and whether or not they archive them, I am not sure about that. We've been one of their strongest partnerships, and I can certainly reach out to them and see if they can provide us with that information and then forward that to the board.
Okay, at some point, I'm not in any particular hurry. I think it's a good model for that we could look at in terms of program evaluation, though. So I don't want to put a lot more on your plate now, but at some point it would be great.
We can definitely ask for that. We just an FYI, we started with one pilot program and expanded, and it's been a very successful program for us at the high school level.
Okay, thank you. Now, Janet, I'd go ahead and move approval of item number 11.
Thanks, Charlie. Is there a second?
Second.
I think Christina got it. Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. And item 14, I think it was JP.
Yeah, I just, so in that agreement, so if I get this right, this is some kind of a scheduling software? Yeah. Like a athletic facility scheduling. Yeah. And it says that they, in the agreement, they can provide text, photos, audio, videos to other entities and agree to share profits with ICCSD. What are they talking about? Text, photos, audio, and videos.
So I'll jump in, and then Matt, if you'd want to jump in too, you can. So they have a pretty extensive suite, and so they do things like their service delivery model can include things like broadcasting your games or your events or things like that, where there's opportunities to move them out onto other platforms. And I know that there are districts out there that monetize that. That's not actually a portion of their platform that we use right now.
And this one was really about a way for us to try to start conducting registration for forms and handling permission to practice and some of those things. So that was the big genesis behind this one, guys, was to be able to collect those things through a virtual environment and to do that instead of shuffling so many papers around with those. So some of those other things could be, of course, they wouldn't be able to use any photos or images of students if they hadn't completed that portion on the directory sign up that we do at the beginning of the year where students and families can choose to have their photo and name and some of that demographic information included or not. So any of those things would also be covered then with our directory policies that way. But really the reason for bringing this to you tonight is around the registration component, trying to handle some of those forms for athletics differently.
Okay, thanks. I move we approve item 14, the Our School Today contracts.
Second.
Thanks, Charlie. Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. We'll move to public hearings. Sean, first up on the Hoover Elementary property.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the conveyance of district property with legal descriptions provided in the attached documentation to the City of Iowa City. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on May 13th, 2020. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public? If so, you can raise your hand.
Okay, thank you, Sean. I think that concludes that public hearing. Next up is around our certified budget amendment.
Let me
I'm looking for Leslie.
click
There he
on
is.
it. That would be good. Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the district's proposed fiscal year 2020 certified budget amendment. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on May 8th, 2020. Are there any comments from the board? Is there anyone from the community that would like to advise or provide comments to the board on the proposed fiscal year 2020 budget amendment?
Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Sean. We will now move into our discussion portion of the agenda. The first item is an update on our board retreat from May 16th. I just sent notes out earlier this morning to directors around the goal document and the notes that we took in terms of the progress that we've made and additional action items. I think once y'all have had a chance to look at that, make any edits and changes and clarifications, we can post that, Kim, to where we put our board goals, just to show, that we're making progress. I thought it was a good conversation. I think it was good for us to kind of level set on what we were able to accomplish. And then we also started thinking about priorities for the next school year. And to that point, I think we agreed as a board that we would have another retreat in July to think about what our goals for the 2020-21 school year would be. And so this was a good opportunity a week or so ago just to kind of level set where we are. I think fully appreciate the impact of the COVID closures on the momentum and progress that we were making on a number of things, but also, help us think about the things that we have accomplished. And we've done actually quite a lot this year. And, just maybe a couple of things to highlight, the CDEEP, the Comprehensive Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Plan, was developed and approved by the board and administrative team working to kind of prioritize activities in that really, really important framing document. And so that's a really big accomplishment. We made really good progress this year on our MTSS and PBIS implementations, noting that we've had 2 schools recognized for their implementation and the quality of it, and that would be Twain and Tate. We did some good work with ICEA on PD for teachers and, trying to get ideas for how we might think about recasting professional development opportunities. A lot of input, and we all, I think, recognize that there's a lot of change management and timing, and this is not something that we would make a shift on quickly. But just to note that we did make good progress, and we sort of got stalled a bit by our school closures. On safety in schools, this was obviously a very big topic for us, and we did develop a care assessment method. We hired a care assessment coordinator, and now we're moving into implementation steps. Boy, we got off on a bang with Profile of a Graduate. Sadly, our school closures brought that all to a halt, but the board is very keen to re-engage Battelle for next school year, hopefully in the fall, to basically restart the process. We had one of our community engagement sessions, and honestly, our world has changed enough, and there's going to be enough time that has passed that we just need to start over. But that's what we're going to be looking to do. We did talk a bit about our FMP 2.0 and are there things that we could begin thinking about prioritizing that wouldn't necessarily need to wait for a new FMP. And I think an example there was proceeding, if we can, with the West secure entrance, for example. We noted a little bit ago earlier during the consent agenda discussion around the inclusive play guidelines, and those were developed and approved and are being used. And so again, that's a really big accomplishment for the district. And then I'll note the work that we did on our climate action resolution. We passed that resolution. We did a baseline emission study. We're working to incorporate hard targets into that resolution before the beginning of next school year. And in future meetings, we'll be looking at solar PPAs and looking at how that might contribute to our target setting process. And so a lot of good progress there. Board governance, Ruthina has been taskmaster pulling that governance committee together to get through all of the policy series, and our goal is to get those complete and ratified before the beginning of the next school year. That's a bit of a stretch goal. There's still a bit of work to do there, but really strong progress from the governance committee on that. And so let's see if there's anything else I would want to just cover. We talked about Pearl again. That's going to come up in a future agenda item. And so those are some things that I would highlight. Anything else, directors, you'd want to note in terms of our progress that we've made this year? we've been busy. And then obviously since March, our time has really been consumed with working and supporting the administrative teams. We work through learning at home and following state guidance and figuring out return to learn. And we'll talk about those things here in just a little bit. But we actually did, despite the last couple months, managed to get a lot of good work done for our district. Some other things I would just highlight from our board retreat is that we did discuss the superintendent transition process and came up with some sort of guide rails around communications with Steve and Matt together in this interim transition process leading up to July 1st when Matt takes over. And then we did talk about the search process, and we talked kind of around the timing and really decided that we would regroup on that in the August timeframe, spending some time at a work session talking about what we would be looking for from a search committee. But it's also waiting a couple months is going to give us a little bit better insight on what we'll be facing next school year in terms of remaining work on the return to learn and our closures and social distancing and things like that. So that's next step around the search process. So anything folks would want to add just to comment on outcomes from the board retreat?
I'll just mention, we also passed a very robust LGBTQ policy statement.
Thank you. Yep, thanks, JP. We're a pretty good board, I would say, and we have an awesome administrative team to help us along the way. So it's really good stuff. And ICEA partners and community partners, we are blessed to be in the community that we're in with all the supports that we have. So if there's nothing else on update from the board retreat, I will turn it over to Steve to lead us through the continuous learning update.
So we have two things in front of you on the agenda, and actually we'll just we'll essentially hit both of them one right after the other. So the one is the continuous learning update, and from a nomenclature standpoint, that's really what we're dealing with right now as we close out on the remainder of the school year, and then the DE's verbiage for next school year is the return to learn component. And so if you think about continuous learning as the 1920 school year and return to learn as the 2021 school year, that'll give you the right frame there. So we are almost done with this school year, which I know feels a little awkward to say as we've been out of school, but we're just about to wrap up the plan that we have for this current school year. And we're in full speed planning for the next school year. And so I'm going to turn it over to the teaching and learning team to give you an update on both of those two. So Matt, Amy, et al., the floor is yours.
Amy, you want to start with elementary tonight?
Why, sure. Thanks, Matt. So it is hard to believe that we are in our last week of kindergarten through sixth grade being in the voluntary educational enrichment opportunities. Looking back over the last 10 weeks or so, we've implemented a variety of things, whether you think about just that initial enrichment opportunities document to suggested daily schedules for kindergarten through sixth grade students and families, to a PK schedule. The librarians worked hard to push out a reading challenge for PK 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 12. Our families have been accessing Clever, Dreambox, Lexia, Newsela. We've been monitoring usage, helping families troubleshoot, maybe sharing some instructional strategies as their children were encountering problems. In the last few weeks, we've rolled out reading and math workbooks and suggested pages that students could be working through. And then at the same time, we've asked our elementary teachers to learn about a learning management system called Seesaw. I can share the last couple of weeks that I have same statistics we're seeing Dreambox and Lexia. Our statistics decline in usage a little bit. With Dreambox over the last several weeks, we saw a high of 64% of our students using that product. And just last week, that was down to 49%. With our Lexia product, we saw a high of 58% of our students using that. And last week we were at 46%. So those are two products that our families are gonna hear about from us in communication later in the week that they'll still have access to all summer long, and we're certainly gonna encourage the use there. Then also last week and then this week, our staff have been back in the buildings in a socially distanced manner, but preparing their rooms for closure, packing up student belongings, and completing year-end tasks. We have pickup slated tomorrow at the elementary level between 1 and 6, and then again on Thursday morning from 8 to 11 for students to come collect their belongings, as well as any medications that still might be in the building. And then, like I just noted, we do intend to put some communication together. We're working on a variety of things to share with our families and staff as they head out for official summer break. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thanks, Amy. Secondary wise, yeah, a lot of the same things to kind of think about, you know, where we've come and where we've been throughout this period of time, from starting the voluntary to then ramping up to required, and even our junior high courses following a lot of that same format that we tried to do under the required model with high school. We did grab some statistics for you tonight around some of the continuous learning components. Initially, when we sent out that survey about students continuing on in courses for our high school students, we had about 90% of the high school students complete that survey, which we thought was outstanding from an initial survey standpoint. So it was about 4,331 students. We had 877 students requested to be contacted by their counselors to discuss participation. So that, of course, led to a follow-up. Another 3,500 students continued in at least one course, and then 834 students took a pass in all courses. So that number was one we were targeting because we wanted to try to keep that low and keep them engaged in some way. As far as Canvas access goes, there was 3,675 high school students that have accessed Canvas since the closure, so it's about 85%. Of course, not all learning happens through Canvas, but that was our main hub as we went one-to-one here a few years ago. Secondary-wise, we've averaged approximately 50,000 Canvas interactions per day at our high school since the continuous learning option began. And the engagement rate has been steady on a week-to-week basis as we looked at it from April 27th on. And so we feel good about that students were staying engaged with something. Of course, none of those numbers were 100%, and that's always what our goal is. And we know that there were students that we continued to try to reach out to and continued to try to connect with, and some that we weren't able to. But that drives a lot of our work and our conversations for the fall, knowing that, you know, we're going to need to be better in some of those areas and continue to try to be innovative in our approach to that. One thing that I wanted to give a shout out to Brady for taking the lead on here is he's forming some focus groups through the ICA to kind of review this continuous learning model with our teaching staff to try to look for things like that, where blind spots we had and what teachers saw and what kind of feedback they can provide from how that experience went, and where were things difficult for them, where were things successes, and what can we grow on and improve on. So that'll help inform those return to learn plans as well as we go through that next stage and transition into that next topic even tonight a little bit here. But I guess to kind of wrap up the point about continuous learning for secondary, of course, we're in the approaching graduation timeframe here with the 28th, 29th, and 30th. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we're excited for the students and excited we can host a ceremony for them, even though it's not in the traditional sense as we had all hoped for. But we do think we have some special events planned for the day and for the follow-up for their families to celebrate that with them, be able to come on campus and do a celebratory event. And so I know a lot of you as board members have seen that sign up and plan to be out and involved, and so we appreciate that, and I'm sure the families and students would appreciate seeing some prominent people in the community there to celebrate that day with them as well. But otherwise, I think we'd take any questions you might have around the continuous learning component before we jump to the return to learn plan.
So I'd ask both Amy and Matt, and Brady may want to have some ideas too here. I think students, I'm sorry, teachers are asked to contact each student at least twice a week under the guidance that we've been operating under. I think that applies to the 7 through 12 grades also. So do we have some idea about how that's going? You know, the K through 6 participation is a little alarming, or not where we would like it to be at this point. But how about the teacher to student contacts, or how is that being playing out?
Well, you are correct, Charlie, that we did ask our teaching staff probably by about the second week in April to start officially using Zoom meetings with their students and families to help the kids get into those meetings at least twice a week. You know, initially we said reach out any venue that you could to make access. We did not collect that data at the district level. So what I did is ask the building principals to create just an Excel sheet on the number of times that they were reaching out to families and having success. So, you know, there were times when it meant that we counted it as a opportunity, or the fact that we had gotten a hold of a family one of our teachers had, because sometimes our teachers were contacting several kids in the family and I'd only hear one time. But we did use a variety of ways to do that, not only classroom teacher, but if our school family advocates or our counselors had a relationship with the families and our teachers were not having luck, they would reach out. So there was a full court press that went on. We just weren't necessarily collecting that. We weren't collecting that at the district level, but the buildings were asked to monitor that. In the return plan documents that the state has created for us to as think abouts for next year, there's something in there that they're calling a student tracker, and that's essentially what they'd be encouraging us to do is approach that kind of in a standardized way and monitor that a little bit better through any potential future school closures.
I could jump in too, Charlie. I appreciate that question, and appreciate the work that the administrative team has done in partnering with ICEA. And I would say that we're still trying to figure out our overall data in terms of engagement and things like office hours or the twice weekly Zooms at the elementary level. We probably saw anecdotally, I would say, the same patterns across the district, and you tended to have the same students attending those sessions that were also engaged in online learning that was mandatory going for a grade at your high school level, so that we have some gaps. I mean, I think that, you know, in talking with Matt and Chase and Amy and Steve, and Diane, the thing, you know, we need to get better at is engagement. I mean, we just do, and we're learning. And that our number one goal, I think, with our focus groups and some survey things that we're putting together for teacher groups, is to try to figure out what worked well and how we can build on that. You know, this is just such a new task for us, and I think that we did okay, but you know, I think we all want to do better and are committed to doing better in engaging students. And a part of that this last week has been in asking students what worked for them. I think it's really important for us to understand the student experience. And so we've been reaching out to students just to find that out as well. And I would say another anecdotal piece, I had one of my office hours at 10 a.m., which I've been up for a long time by 10 a.m. in the morning. A high school kid during a school closure, that's almost an ask for them. In some cases, their sleep patterns, you figure out really quickly, are very different than what they normally are. And they're fully, you know, willing to admit that. And there's nothing wrong with it. It just is, that's sort of the reality. They're not showing up, starting school at 8:50, and so we have to adjust, and we're learning about those sorts of things. So I think there's sort of two levels going on. We just have to really respect and appreciate the student experience and find out and learn about that, and then also learn from each other. And you know, that's part of what you know, we're really committed to doing this last week with the student experience, and then, you know, in the coming weeks here as we figure out how to return to learn and just become better at teaching and learning. I mean, these are really good lessons for us. You know, sort of regardless. And it's been interesting. I was listening to some of Matt's data, which I really liked. I've had students, no other AP teachers have had this as well, who did not go for a grade in any class, but who still took the AP test, and they still engaged in some of our learning activities. So it was just I mean, you know, they're all, it's just a very different pattern for every, you know, kid in that way. But that's sort of the way I look at it. We've got work to do, you know, and I'm not sure what the answers are, but we've got a really smart team of teachers in the district that work with the administrators well, and I think we'll get better at it.
Well, thanks everyone. And I would just say as a board member, I'm certainly wanting to encourage and provide resources that you need as we continue to figure out how to engage students at all grade levels, students and families at all grade levels. Because obviously if we're going to be not in class next year, it's going to be a real challenge for us and every other district. So.
And not to belabor the point, but I think an important one we'll continue to focus on too, Charlie, is what Brady said about how do we get better at teaching and learning, through the process too, because getting the kids on the Zoom call is one thing, getting to participate and be actively engaged is even a different one. That's a different level. And so once we get them there, even in our classroom, sometimes that's difficult, let alone on a phone call, getting everybody to feel comfortable and reach out. So lots of progress has been made, but definitely lots to go. So appreciate the questions.
Hey, Matt, I just have one comment to pass on to your secondary team, at least at Southeast. My daughter went and got her stuff today, and they said it was just a seamless process in and out of the parking lot. So kudos to that team for making that organized and ready to go.
Great. Thank you, Paul. That's one that, again, like Amy had talked about with behind the scenes work or some of the things, that the team has spent a ton of time on to think about, and then to have it go as smoothly as you hope it does. It's, it's a great success, but it's also a big relief, because I think there's a few of those things that made us really nervous. So thanks for sharing that. We'll definitely pass that on.
I was going to say that too. My high schoolers both went and dropped off their books and music and things like that at the school. They left the house and they were home 15 minutes later. I said, "What'd you forget?" And I said, "Nothing. We were just all done." So they were actually at the school for 2 minutes maybe and got all the stuff dropped off. It was really slick.
Okay, thanks, folks. What's next?
I think return to learn is what we
Yes.
had next on there. So Steve, do you have anything you want to start with, or you just want me to jump in?
Nope. Go ahead and jump in.
So I think return to learn wise, what we're really trying to do is consider, you've heard us talk a lot about these 3 different models. And so we have the 3 different models of continuous learning, which you can conceptualize as kind of the experience we've been in now. On-site delivery, which would look more like we were in prior to March, and then this hybrid middle model. And so the way the team is going to try to chunk through this and get us to some semblance of what some plans could look like for August by the end of June is really starting with what we're most familiar with right now, and that's a continuous learning portion, and knowing that some of these things we just talked about, the very learnings we have and things we need to improve upon and the things we did really well and that we can replicate if we have to be in a continuous learning mode are front of mind for us. And so we're trying to take stock of those and work through each of those 7 areas that the Department of Ed has outlined that we need to consider in each of those 3 models. And so we're forming some teams, and I wouldn't call it necessarily like a task force, but we do have a return to learn district leadership team that's been formed and that we'll look at to try to work through these different components. We know the community is a big part of some of those things. And so what we feel our job is to try to figure out what some parameters around each of these components of these different models would look like, and then to figure out where do we need and where do we need additional feedback and also community support for anything we would eventually move forward on. And so right now, a lot of that workings happen internally as we work through each of those 3 models and the 7 different areas of those models. And the first kind of 2-week focus here is on continuous learning. Then we talk about on-site delivery and what's going to have to be different about on-site. So even if it's prior to the way it looked somewhat prior to March, we know things are going to be different for us. Our reality is going to be changed. There's going to be different social distancing and safety measures we have to have in place for the school year, even if everybody's back on campus. And so that'll be kind of the second look for as we go through. And then the third one will be taking on this hybrid model about what would we do. And those are maybe the most crazy scenarios or most out of the box scenarios you've seen in the news about what other countries have tried or what other districts are thinking about doing. And so we need some time to continue to research those, figure out again some limiters or barriers within our system, and then try to develop some potential solutions on what that could look like. But I do think that, like I had mentioned before, that community component could be a big one. for us in any of those. And so we know we need to involve stakeholders into those 7 different subgroups we have from throughout the organization, and then also counting on some community feedback and recommendations for what makes sense. You talk about local mental health professionals, local public health officials, parents, I mean, I think all of those things are ones we need to consider for what's going to work in Iowa City, because what works in Iowa City might be different than what works in a different part of the state. And for better or worse, we have some significant local control around this issue right now. And that'll be how we try to transition through that work. So while Steve has done a nice job of reminding you guys those assurances are all we really have to complete by July 1st, we still feel a responsibility to get ahead of this. And I think to toot our own horn a little bit today, Amy said it well, we're about a week ahead of where we feel the DE has been on some of this planning as we've divided into teams. And then as the teams have starting to look at some of this, their guidance is coming about a week after we do that, or, even some templates for things for these teams to consider are coming out now as we've started to structure out some meeting dates and times for that. And so we feel like we got the biggest, best head start and jump on it we could, and we'll continue to try to work through that diligently here in the next month, and then hopefully be able to continue to share some more finalized approaches or plans or considerations as we look at each of those 3 models. So that's kind of the general overview I think we can provide. I know you may have specific questions, and I think part of our job is being responsible to our community too, I guess, is the final thing I would say about bringing forward sensible plans that would be realistic or achievable, so that we also aren't sharing things that are not something that we can pull off or that we don't have the resources to do. And so we need to be responsible in how we think about that and talk about that too.
So Matt, are you at a point yet? So if you have some idea of which one of the 3 options we're probably going to head towards?
Well, Charlie, I think the idea really is we may have to use all 3 of those at any point next year. And so that's why we're asked to develop really a model around all 3 of those. And so we need to plan and prepare for that. We may have to deliver at any one time on all 3 of those, and to know on June 30th which of those 3 we're going to start with on August, August 24th might be still difficult to know, but we need to know we have a continuous learning plan. If we can't bring anybody on campus, we need to know we have a plan for bringing everybody on campus, and we need to know if it doesn't make sense to have that high of a volume of people on campus, that we have a hybrid plan that we can go to. And that may change throughout the year depending on where the pandemic situation rests. And so that's the way I would answer your question is I don't think we know yet, but we'll have a plan for all 3.
Okay. And how about the composition of the Return to Learn district leadership team? Is it possible to send that out just by position, if not name? So as board members, as we get some background on who we're seeking to advise us as we go forward here.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's just to be transparent with you, primarily it's our cabinet team, right? And then we'll work down to our principal team and our teacher team, and then also some of our support positions, guidance counselors, teachers, student family advocates. We're trying to keep the teams in a fashion that we can really look at them from an angle where we can move things along and get work done, but that we have all voices accounted for. Because we know if we get teams too large, then the issues bog down and we don't make movement on them. And so we need to keep them nimble, but we need to keep them representative of all voices. And so we're in the process of getting all of those developed and getting all of those time and meeting structures set. But our cabinet level team has been involved in those early conversations. And so if we really had to say, who's your core district leadership team, that's your cabinet level team. And but as we break out those teams into those 7 different areas, once we have a firmer handle on who's all regularly meeting and who all composes those, we can sure share some of that with you.
Okay, and I'm particularly interested in non-district members too. And you may not have those yet. Right.
Yeah, and I think that's one where I'm trying to say too, I think as we think about, does it make sense to ask somebody to spend time in meetings all of with those, or are there different ways we need to get larger community feedback too? And so that's part of what we're also trying to develop right now is if we really need a lot of community feedback, then we might have to figure out an instrument to be able to go get some of that broad feedback, so we have a good data set around that. And then where it doesn't make sense to pull in individuals to represent organizations or groups. So
Oh, great.
yeah.
That's a very good approach. Right. Right. And is the board going to have to approve the whatever set of recommendations we come to by June 30th for the state?
No, there's actually not a requirement that the board do that. And like I had shared before, essentially what we're doing is we're simply providing assurances through that model, just like we did with the continuous learning plan, that we'll abide by all federal and state statutes. We'll apply by, we will comply with all U.S. Department of Ed and Iowa Department of Ed rules and regulations. So there isn't actually any intent to the plan there, Charlie. It's just simply the assurances that essentially we promised to follow the rules, and we did not see the need, after looking at the application process and the continuous learning plan, to bring that forward, since that's an operating principle that we're going to follow those rules, and we would consider that to be the same here. So what we do anticipate, though, is getting back to the first question that you asked, Matt, which is, what does in-person learning look like? What does online learning look like? What does some kind of blended model look like? And those are the kinds of things that we want to bring back in front of the board, so that you have the opportunity not only to review them, but to ask questions about them and be prepared as we may have to transition in and out of different models over the course of the next school year, depending on what happens from a public health standpoint. So that kind of granular detail, that will come to the board.
And you think that'll be in the July timeframe?
Yes. Yeah, we'll start to see that July and certainly into August as we get closer to the start of the school year, and more of that gets crystallized and ready to go.
So I think it was Matt maybe that said, looking at, or maybe it was Steve, looking at kind of what other countries are doing and seeing what's going on there. And, I'm on a call a couple times a week with all of our, my work satellite facilities around the globe. And Belgium today opened up the rest of their elementary. They had started with just like 2 grades were open, and now they've done some other ones. And the nice thing, a lot of the European countries, they're doing school all through the summer. So there's time probably to see some of, how it goes. But I would guess they're going to kind of see this rise and then maybe a fall back if they start to see some other things. So it'll be interesting to watch some of those other countries and how they're kind of handling it, and even logistically how they're doing it. There's been quite a few different examples out of the European countries. I think our Singapore facility said that they were opening up the schools shortly, if they haven't already. They do things very different there than Europe, but it'll be a nice test case to see, how it works in practice, if they're having to do like every other day or, half a class at a time or something like that. I'm not sure what everybody's doing, but certainly we can learn something from all of those folks trying to do it.
Anything else on return to learn? Hearing none, thank you for those updates.
Real quick,
Yeah.
this is kind of looking ahead a little bit, but even sooner, thinking about like sports, since folks can play basketball, baseball and softball this summer, what are they going to do about crowds and audience for those events? No.
Well,
That's the $1 million question there, JP.
Right.
So
we spent a lion's share of the day today meeting with various people. The Metro Soups, Matt and I were on a call late this afternoon with them. The conference meeting took place today. What I can share with you is this, and maybe this will just give you some context for it. We know that every community is in a different place, and so the charge that we sent our ADs to the conference meeting was that they be willing to accept whatever the least common denominator is. So you might have one community that says, let's all go to the ballpark. And then you might have another community that says, we don't want any spectators there at all. And so the charge that we sent our ADs to the meeting with was, that we want to make sure that everybody is able to meet the needs of their community, and we will accept whatever the most restrictive determination is for audience at a game. And so they were working on that this afternoon. We may have to be back on the phone tomorrow. We've got an athletic council meeting tomorrow also to talk about that. In the end, what we want to do is we want to make sure that our kids are safe. And first and foremost, if we're going to participate in these activities, we have to be able to ensure the students and their parents and our staff that they can do so in a manner that's safe and provides some reassurances for their own personal health. And not that an audience is not necessary for some of those games, but you could play without them. And so that is for us a secondary concern, and we are going to try to make sure that we figure out how to do that right. But first and foremost, we want to make sure that our kids and our staff are safe.
It sounds like it's going to be more of a comfort level for all the districts. I mean, the press conference today, they loosened up a whole lot of restrictions today, opening up outdoor events and groups bigger than 10. And they did talk about 50% capacity or a level that can ensure social distancing, which, in a stand at a football game or a baseball game or whatever, is probably less than 50% capacity. But they have thrown it open to kind of let you decide how you want to best meet the guidelines, but it's definitely loosened up. I mean, they're opening up amusement parks, and I got an email from Adventureland talking about how they're all ready to open. And I think it's going to be, as you said, Steve, some places are going to be like, let's all do it. And other places are going to be like, nope, we are not ready for that. And so I think the approach of finding, the lowest common denominator, that comfort level is probably a really good way to do it.
And maybe one last thing to share with you, and this is something that when Matt and I were on the phone with the Metro Soups today, different communities are still maintaining different rules about gatherings and social distance. And so they still have the autonomy right now to make some of those restrictions. And we know that there are still some hot spots in Iowa, and they've got different rules than we do. And so I think that's something really important that we need to take into consideration too, both as we determine whether or not our fans can travel to their communities and if their fans can travel to our communities, and what does that look like?
I just have to say here that I'm focusing on what happens in the fall. We're trying to have the best instruction we can have in the middle of a continuing pandemic. So softball, baseball games in the summertime are not something that I would be supportive of this tremendous administrative team spending very much time on.
I guess I would disagree because it's going to happen. So, I mean, if it's going to happen, we got to make sure we do it right.
Yeah, I think it's just a little difficult from the standpoint of, I think to be honest with you, I think we felt like we were in a position that we were going to get to spend time on those return to learn plans and dig into a lot of that and have a chance to do that. And then we did get a little bit of a, literal curveball here about playing baseball and softball for the summer. And so we can't take our eye off the fall. We know that that's something that still has to be a priority and something that we're going to continue to move the work on. And that's why it's important we have a structure and a framework around how that's going to happen. And then, as has been typical through this COVID experience, about every 2 weeks or every 2.5 weeks, we get something that changes on us a little bit. And then we have to adjust and get a bunch of heads together and figure out what the best, most workable solution is. And so, the reality is it is probably less safe, and I wouldn't tell any of our employees that. I wouldn't tell any of our students or parents that. It is going to be less safe to show up at the ball diamond to do that than it is staying at your house right now. But everybody's going to have to make a decision about what works for them and what works for their family. And we even need to treat our employees with that same empathy and respect and try to work with them on those concerns. And so we have a lot of work to do over the next few days to do that, because it is a part of our program and it is something we're being asked to do. And so we'll work through those components, but I hear you, Charlie. We'll continue to work on that component for the fall, and we're committed to that.
Thanks, folks. Any other questions on return to learn? If not, we will move over to the annual asset protection report. Les, are you going to cover that for us?
Most certainly, Janet. Good evening, directors. In your packet, you were provided several documents. First of all, thank you, Sean, for identifying a formula error in one of those. I did forward that to Kim. We'll make sure we get you an updated form. I don't see it in the board packet, so I apologize for that. But overall, it's about a 0.62% increase, or about $20,000 over all of those costs. I would like to touch on just a couple things. The first one is our employee insurances. Our employees are our most important asset, and so you know, it's very good news to report that all of our insurance coverages remain at the exact same level that they were last year, and at the exact same premiums that they were last year. So you know, we have an extremely strong benefit program that covers all of our employees. And being able to offer that and no additional costs is extremely valuable. And we're able to do that and provide the resources that the board has approved to use primarily towards salaries for our staff people as we move forward in the next year. So, you know, that's probably the most positive thing that I can say out of this, that supports all of our important assets. We did approve just this week for Wellmark to continue to offer telemarketing and teledoc type services related to COVID-19 expenditures through August. So that's an extension of about 2 months, 6 weeks to 2 months over what it had been previously. So as we continue to move through this, our plan will continue to cover those and make those opportunities available, so those people that are more comfortable to receive medical services through a telemedicine approach can do that while we're still in this pandemic. Moving on to the other parts of our asset protection, our insurance administrators with Gallagher that serve our self-funded pool for property casualty liability and our workers' comp have done an extremely difficult but lengthy process to maintain our coverages for our facilities and for liability. They have reached out to over 70 reinsurance companies for our pool to make sure that we have the coverages that we want, the various levels that we want, layers of that coverage that we want. It's very granular, so I'm not going to get into that with you. But those levels of insurance are broad, and they make sure that the district is covered. Iowa is no longer just kind of a throw off in the property area of coverages. We are now in Tornado Alley. It has moved up from Kansas and where Toto went to, and Iowa is part of that, and especially the western half of Iowa, which some of our members of our pool are in, is highly susceptible to the tornadoes and wind damages and really have fallen underneath this vector. And insurance carriers are not looking at past experience. They're projecting what the weather models are going to be into the future for the coverage. Now, how they do that, I don't know, but that's how they base their coverage and their premiums on. It's not how many tornadoes or storms you had over the last 3 years, like it is auto accidents on your personal auto policy. It's completely changed, and that makes us a high risk coverage area now. So it's made it more difficult. We've had to modify a little bit some of the coverages, but it doesn't jeopardize any of the coverages moving forward. And so the summary of coverage document does provide a comparison from year to year, and then the premium comparison shows where we're at. While we do have an increase in some premiums, be offset by our equipment breakdown coverage. And so from a net aspect, we have a virtually flat coverage for our property casualty, workers' comp, and our equipment breakdown. So with that, I'll entertain any questions you might have.
Questions for Les? I thought all the materials are really helpful, Les, in walking through kind of a little bit of the history, the pooling agreements, and just, yeah, the process that we go through. I thought that was really helpful. Anything else? Hearing none, thank you, sir. I think we will move on to our action items for the night. First up is the 2019-2020 certified budget amendment. Anything you'd want to add, Les, before we move forward?
I will just point out, since we have several new board members to this process, this is an annual process that the district does. And the primary reason that we do it annually is we would have set this year's budget in the functional areas in April of 2019. So we're 13, 14 months further down the road. We have much more accurate information as to where this year is going to end up. This does not impact, does not impact property taxes in any way for the current year or for next year. That's already been set. So this is just making sure that our expenditures will align with that. A lot of that has to do with our construction projects in PEPL, SAVE, and the GEO bond categories, and where those projects have accelerated through the financing with the bonds that were sold earlier this calendar year to make that possible. And so those expenditures, now we have a clearer vision of those. And so that's why we realign those with the functional categories that are required to report by the state of Iowa.
Is there a motion? Thank you for that background, Les. Is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve the 2019-20 certified budget amendment.
Second.
Wasn't sure who got that second. Kim, did you catch that?
I'll give it to Sean.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Our next action item is around a resolution for a hearing date around a construction easement on Barrington Road. Steve, is there any thing you want to highlight here?
This again, working with the city as they work to upgrade the American Legion Road in that area around the Barrington intersection. And this is our opportunity as both a good municipal partner and also looking out for future traffic patterns around the school to provide them with the land that they need to get that work done.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is the K6 1-to-1 Chromebook initiative. Adam, is there anything you want to add on this?
I don't think so. This is really just what we talked about last week. The one thing I do want to mention is that this includes purchase of Chromebooks, the management licenses, and cases for the 1-to-1 program at the elementary level.
That's great. I think it's nice to see this accelerated. Is there a motion to approve the Chromebook initiative K6 1-to-1? Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. Votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. And the final action item is a resolution for conveyance of Hoover Elementary property to the city of Iowa City. Any color commentary on this one before we put it up for a vote?
Goes right along with number 2.
Yep. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
I move to approve the resolution.
Second.
Thank you. Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. We'll move into agenda setting. So we are now moving back into our regular second and fourth Tuesday meeting schedule. So on the 9th, we had in previous closed session talked about potentially having another closed session on Lucas Review prior to the meeting on June 9th. And so we'll pencil that in. For the June 9th meeting, we have a standard agenda, community comment, a consent agenda. We're finally getting back to all of our annual reports that got displaced as we started moving into having to address the COVID-19 closure. So all the different annual reports, district workforce, tech report, FMP report, workplace safety, grounds care, nutrition services, transportation services, and climate action plan report. We will also have discussion items on the return to learn update and the solar power purchase agreements discussion. And then finally, we'll have an action item around the easement on Barrington Road that we just approved moments ago. So anything else that directors would want to see? I know that PPA had been out for consideration. I'm glad to see that on the agenda. Is there anything else, folks, that you'd want to discuss on the 9th? All right. I always move on right as someone's getting ready to say something. So I'm just going to double check no one has anything to add for the June 9th agenda. Okay, that's great. I think we're set.
Janet, one thing, we do have a P&G meeting on June 2nd.
Sorry?
P&G on the 2nd.
P&G, thank you, on June 2nd. Thank you.
Janet, before we adjourn, I just want to mention one thing. So Molly Abraham, assistant principal at West High, is retiring. So I just want to give her a shout out because, you know, Molly and Jerry Argerbright are who hired me and started me down this whole path. So Molly was a great support to me and especially the special ed department over there at West. So just a big shout out to Molly. I know they had a big drive-by parade the other day. So great person, did a lot of great work for us, and I wish her the best.
You're here. Thanks, JP. Anything else for the good of the cause, folks? All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, good evening, everyone. Have a good
See you in
one.
a couple
Take care.
weeks.
Good to see you. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.